Flooding is catastrophic in every way. It can destroy property and infrastructure, take lives, and have far-reaching negative effects on people's health. In a world that is getting warmer, flooding is becoming more common for more people, so we are going to look at the effects that it has on human health. Today's video is about how flooding can impact our health. As a result of climate change, the world is becoming increasingly vulnerable to extreme weather events. As a result, more people are expected to experience floods and their devastation, including the severe effects that they can have on human health. Effects of flooding on people's health. The health effects of natural disasters like flooding are multifaceted and cumulative, and they can have an effect on an individual or an entire population at the same time. The nature of the health hazards that a specific community may face, the severity of those hazards, and the degree to which the population may be susceptible to them might vary based on a variety of factors. There are a number of factors that go into it, including geography, population size and density, as well as degrees of preparedness and resilience. The characteristics of the flood itself also have a role in this, regardless of whether it is a flash flood, a coastal flood, riverine floods, or permanent floods for low-lying communities. Flooding has the potential to adversely affect human health in both the short and long term, both directly and indirectly. In addition, the health of populations that have been impacted by flooding is not the only population that is at danger. Responders to natural disasters, medical personnel, and other personnel providing essential services could also be impacted. When people think of the health concerns that are associated with flooding, they frequently think first of drowning. Injuries, cold, and animal bites are only some of the potential dangers, but there is also the possibility of contracting contagious infections, becoming hungry, and having mental health issues. When natural catastrophes such as floods happen, there is a lot of attention focused not just on the human casualties but also on the economic impact and property damage. However, many aspects of these concerns overlap with those related to health. Flooding can put a strain on health services owing to damaged infrastructure, loss of health personnel, and restricted access to drugs. As a result, persons in need of care or treatment may have to wait longer to receive it. It is possible that the economic impact or the loss of belongings and livelihoods that can be attributed to a flooding disaster might result in financial insecurity that may damage mental health. This is in addition to the grief that can be caused by the loss of loved ones. Diseases. In the event that flooding occurs, another significant public health worry is the spread of infectious diseases and outbreaks. These can take the form of waterborne infections, which are illnesses that are contracted through the consumption of contaminated water or through coming into contact with it. Diseases such as leptospirosis, cholera, typhoid fever, and diarrhea are examples of these. There is also the possibility of contracting a disease that is transmitted by a vector, which is an intermediate species that carries the disease pathogen like a mosquito. Dengue fever and malaria are two examples of diseases that can be spread by vectors that are brought about by flooding. Because flooding can cause sewage overflow as well as damage to water supply and sanitation systems, it raises the risk of these diseases and the possibility for epidemics in populations. This risk is increased because of the potential for these diseases to spread. Typhoid fever, cholera, and hepatitis A are among diseases that can be spread through contaminated drinking water. In regions that are at risk of coastal flooding, in addition to the possibility of hypertension and eclampsia, there is also the possibility of salt water penetrating the drinking water supply. When floodwaters recede, standing water that may have been left behind in gardens, other areas of the home, or even farming grounds may create a breeding ground for mosquitoes, which in turn may contribute to the spread of diseases such as dengue or malaria. Over 100,000 cases of dengue fever were reported in Bangladesh in 2019, contributing to 179 fatalities. The outbreak was ascribed to flooding that occurred during the monsoon season of that particular year. Molds can cause lung and systemic fungal diseases, which can be brought on by being displaced, which can eventually lead to congestion in evacuation centers. Other problems can be brought on by being displaced. People who have been forced to flee to temporary shelters are, according to the findings of the European Climate and Health Observatory, more likely to be exposed to infectious diseases and germs, and as a result, are more prone to developing health problems. Leptospirosis is a disease that can transmit from person to person when water that has been polluted with rat urine comes in touch with the skin of an infected person. Injuries can also potentially lead to infections or diseases. There has been an increase in the number of cases of leptospirosis, typhoid fever, and dengue in the Philippines as a result of heavy rainfall and flooding. The Philippines is the third most vulnerable country in the world to natural hazards and is among the countries most at risk from climate change. Well, do you like what you are seeing so far? Don't forget to like and subscribe. Keep watching because you don't want to miss what we have at the number 1 spot. Problems with one's mental health. When compared to the acute health implications that flooding can have, mental health concerns, which can manifest at a later time, are frequently ignored and are not examined to the same extent. It is recognized, as of this point in time, that the ordeal of surviving a natural disaster such as floods can have an effect on people after the event, and sometimes for a very long time beyond that. In the wake of a natural disaster, including flooding, people frequently struggle with a variety of mental health issues, including anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, psychosis, and sleeplessness. Flood victims in the UK had a risk of long-term mental health problems that was between 4 and 8.5 times higher than the risk that persons who had not been affected by floods had. After being exposed to flooding in the year 2000, one woman developed post-traumatic stress disorder, and rain became one of her triggers. The process of cleaning up, recovering from, and rebuilding after a natural disaster can be a cause of stress, especially if neither the government nor the private sector does a good job of managing it. Malnutrition or a lack of enough nutrition. Flooding disasters can have a number of negative effects on people's health, one of which is undernutrition or malnutrition, which is rarely discussed despite the evidence that it exists. It is not uncommon for victims to consume less calories during or after a flood, and they frequently lose access to their regular sources of food supply. Flooding can also drastically disrupt food systems such as agriculture, which can have a negative impact on food supply. This can have an impact on the quantity as well as the quality of the food that is accessible, which can ultimately lead to insufficient nutrition and food insecurity. As a result of flooding over the past 3 years in certain regions of South Sudan, hundreds of thousands of people have been forced to relocate, and many of them have resorted to eating wild foods like water lilies because they have lost their crops and livestock, which were their primary sources of food. It was projected that there were approximately 2.5 million people who faced a significant lack of access to food. So, that's it for today's video. What do you think of the number 1 spot? Hit us up in the comments and let's chat. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notifications for our channel so you never miss what's coming next from us. Thanks for watching.